We're talking about two of Winston-Salem's most popular suburbs today, Clemmons, North Carolina and Lewisville, North Carolina, and they're popular for good reason. You know, niche.com has them both ranked as some of the top suburbs in the entire state of North Carolina, and they're also ranked right now as the #1 and #2 place to live in all of Forsyth County. I moved to my first house in Lewisville, North Carolina in the summer of 2019 with my two sons. I did it fully remote, and that was before it was cool to do that. There wasn't a ton of information online back then. I was looking in both towns, just going mostly off of what I saw as school district rankings for my two sons. And at the time, Lewisville just kind of happened to be where I found my house at. Now, when I was ready for my next house, Lewisville ended up being where I stayed, primarily because both my kids were not driving at that time. I wanted them to stay in the same school district, so we stayed in Lewisville. I enjoy living here, but I do want to go over both of these towns. There are some unique things about both, and there are some commonalities about both. So if you're thinking about moving to the area and you're considering Lewisville or Clemmons, you can just kind of do a little bit more of a side-by-side comparison either before or after you come out to visit them so you can make a good decision. And just to kind of get this out of the way up front, I think a lot of people will be happy in either town. I was considering both towns. A lot of the people that I speak to when they're thinking about moving to North Carolina, they're considering both towns as well. But I think a side-by-side is kind of nice to do just so you can get a little bit better idea, if anything, to hone down your selections or maybe rule one out, or you can still consider both. I'm Jeff Valentino. If you take a look at my recent sales, you'll see that I sell a lot of real estate in both Lewisville and Clemmons. So I'm very familiar with both of these towns. And if you need help with that, there's a relocation guide and a link to my Google reviews as well as my contact information in the description below. We're going to talk about both of these suburbs and compare them in a few different areas. We're going to go for the overall feel. We're going to talk about the different schools, the location, the commute, different things to do, and of course the housing. The first one we're going to talk about is just the general feel or vibe of the different towns because they are a little bit different in how they feel. Now, looking at niche.com, Niche has Lewisville as feeling rural and it has Clemmons feel as sparse suburban. And I have to say, I disagree with both of these characteristics. Now, I do remember when I was visiting here back in 2018 before I moved, and when I first got here in 2019, I do remember driving through Lewisville and just feeling, man, this feels like a small town. It just was so different from where I came from in the suburbs of Chicago. It did feel very small, but I would definitely not call it rural feeling. And just like I would definitely not call Clemmons sparse suburban feeling. If you want a guideline to kind of compare that to, I would say let's just take those both from the niche ratings and move those up one. So I would say Lewisville feels sparse suburban and Clemmons just feels kind of suburban. And that's what Clemmons really reminded me of when I drove through here. It reminded me a lot of the smaller suburbs in Chicago. There are, strip malls, lots of different things to do, plenty of shopping, a lot of different parks and amenities, a lot of families, places for retirees, there are apartment complexes, just like a more fully developed suburb. In opposite of that, Lewisville at about half the size of Clemmons, right? Lewisville is about half the size, so it's going to feel a little bit smaller, obviously, but it did not feel rural, like I said. It did feel kind of sparse. It just has, I guess, I call it just a small town feel. Clemmons has a little bit more activity, a little bit more traffic, a lot more things to do, where Lewisville just kind of has a little bit of a small town feel. It's quaint. There are parts of the town that are charming when you go through like the little strip kind of near where downtown or the town center is. There are a lot of little antique shops and things like that. So it just got kind of that small town feel. There's a nursery right in the center of town where everybody goes and buys their plants. And there are some grocery stores and restaurants, but they're smaller ones. They're not the giant scale like you would see in other parts of town, even if you go down to Clemmons. So again, of course that depends where you're coming from, that comparison, but I do disagree with Niche's categorization on there as far as like Lewisville rural and Clemmons sparse suburban. Again, just move those up a notch. You can kind of get a little bit of a better, at least feel in your mind of what the two different towns are like. All right, talking about the schools in Lewisville and Clemmons, North Carolina, and I will say off the top again, they both have really high ratings on niche.com. They have some good ratings on greatschools.org. If you want to dig into, demographics, test scores, and all that stuff, I encourage you to go on those sites to take a look at them. I will tell you that both school districts, and that's kind of what drew me here at the beginning and kind of what draws other people when they're thinking about these two areas, are the schools. They're highly ranked. They tend to be highly sought after. My youngest was in 6th grade when we moved here, and so he's been in Lewisville schools all through middle school and in high school. My oldest actually just graduated earlier this month from Reagan High School in Lewisville, and I'll tell you, I've had a great experience with the Lewisville schools. They've gone to Meadowlark Middle School and then Lewisville Middle School when that first opened, all the way through Reagan, a sophomore now and one that just graduated, or one actually a junior now going into this next school year, and one that just graduated. So we've spent some time in the Lewisville School District, and I have a lot of good things to say about them, but not my word for it. I have clients in both school districts in Clemmons and Lewisville that love them both. And I will point out, it's not specific, you can't just say Lewisville is in this school and Clemmons is in that, because there is a little overlap in some of the districts. So if you're really concerned about which school that you'll be in, the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools district page has an address locator in there that I'll link that in the description below as well. If you want to plug in an address, you can see which school it's assigned to. But overall, I've had a great experience in Lewisville schools. I have plenty of clients that have great experiences in Clemmons schools and friends that have that as well. All right, next we're going to talk about the location of Lewisville and Clemmons. Another nice thing is the location of each of these, right? They both border Winston-Salem. Both towns are right next to each other. And we're going to put up some maps with the current homes for sale in both towns right now. And if you take a look at Clemmons, again, remember Clemmons is about twice the size as Lewisville population-wise, but also notice that it's a little bit longer geographically. And then if we take a look at the Lewisville with the current homes for sale, you can get an idea of that. So again, both towns, they border each other. They both border Winston-Salem. Another one of their big appeals, from most places in both of these towns, you can get to downtown in about 15 minutes, sometimes 10, sometimes 15 to 20. But, from my house, I can be at Trader Joe's in about 11 or 12 minutes. I can be at Whole Foods in about the same time, Costco about the same time. So really convenient to the things just outside downtown. But if you want to go into downtown, it's, 15 minutes, simple drive. And the other thing that's common in both of these towns is it's common to travel back and forth. I saw reviews online when they're talking about them. One of the things was like, Lewisville does not have a lot of amenities in it, so you end up having to go the next town over, which kind of, when you're saying that, it kind of makes it sound far, but in reality, Clemmons is, 90 seconds and I'm in Clemmons from my house. So it's not like you're traveling a long, long time to get from one town to the other. Going in between them is very, very common. So even though I live, where I live, I'm in Clemmons almost literally every day. And that's just not for work either, the grocery store, restaurants, I'm shopping or something like that. It's very common. So don't get too caught up, I guess, on the location unless, really being far south in Clemmons down in Davidson County is like a deal breaker for you because you have to get to downtown or something like that. Or if you're going to be, way out west on the western edge of Lewisville that's just getting developed now, that will be a little bit longer ride into downtown. So really the location of both towns are really fantastic. Next, we're going to talk about different things to do in each town. And while this isn't, quite a fair comparison because Clemmons, it is bigger. It has a little bit of everything, but I do just want to talk about them a little bit. So again, so you can just get kind of a comparison. I guess as a real estate agent first, Lewisville has all of your alcohol needs right in town. Yes, we have ABC stores in Lewisville, but also in Lewisville, we have a winery. We have Metaloni Cellars. We actually have a distillery as well, Old Nick Williams Distillery, and we even have a brewery. Incendiary Brewing has a location in Lewisville too. But the real reason I wanted to highlight these is not because I like drinking that much, but they're both really family-friendly places. They have a lot of different activities, from live music to food trucks. It's also just beautiful places just to kind of go and hang out. Old Nick Williams has a petting zoo. And really, they're just some nice places right in town just to kind of go hang out and have a drink if you want to, or have something to eat, or just let the kids run around. Very family friendly, like I said. Lewisville also has Jack Warren Park, a brand new community center, and Mary Warren Park, which are all excellent facilities. Actually, I just recently discovered pickleball for the first time at Mary Warren Park. They have a lot of courts there. It's a really great setup. And Lewisville doesn't have a true downtown, but it has a nice little town center. There's a main little strip that goes through downtown, like I said, with some quaint shops and things like that. But also you have a really nice public library there, but then you have Shallowford Square that does an excellent job at different activities and things to do all throughout the year. Whether that's free concerts, movies after dark, food truck festivals, there's just a ton of things that go down right downtown in Lewisville at Shallowford Square. And I did want to highlight that because that gets looked over when it comes to Lewisville a little bit because, like I said at the beginning, it's not really quite a fair comparison because Clemmons just has a little bit of everything. There is a great variety of things to do for a town of about, 23 or 25,000 people. There are just a ton of things to do in Clemmons. A lot of different restaurants in town, and the quality of those restaurants have really been stepping up their game the last couple of years. If you need some recommendations while you're in town, just let me know. There are a bunch of different places to shop. You have golf courses in Clemmons. You have, of course, Tanglewood Park with a huge variety of outdoor things to do. Clemmons has golf courses, hiking trails, biking trails. It also has one of the best YMCAs in the entire Triad area. The Jerry Long YMCA is a great facility. And if you're really into golf, Clemmons is right near Bermuda Run, Meadowlands, and some other really great golf courses. Now, when we talk about the housing, again, similar but different if you're kind of picking up on a trend here. So the housing in Lewisville tends to have a little bit higher price on average. It has a little bit higher income on average. It has more luxury housing and more luxury neighborhoods like Lakes of La Sarra, Montrachet, or Marin. Where Clemmons has, some luxury housing. Well, just to give you an example of that, when I was recording this, in Lewisville right now, there are almost 10 homes listed at over $1 million, where in Clemmons right now, there is one. So the housing in Clemmons has a huge variety as well, all the way from, 60s and 70s ranches to luxury homes. But Clemmons also has a lot of the new construction that's going on in the Triad right now is located in Clemmons. But also Clemmons really has some nice established neighborhoods that are still very highly desirable. They have, some amenities like neighborhood pools and things like that all in those neighborhoods. There are plenty of neighborhoods like that in Clemmons, all while being in a great location, that's close to shopping and everything like that. And I did not mean to give the impression that Lewisville is just $1 million plus houses. I don't live in one. But again, higher price on average. But in Lewisville, there are some neighborhoods in here like the Sequoia neighborhood where you can get a nice home move-in ready in the mid threes and on up from there. Occasionally you'll see a home in Lewisville in the high twos, but Clemmons, you can tend to get a little bit more for your money down there. So if that's a consideration, you might lean towards Clemmons in that regard. Now the commute for both of them, again, similar but different. So Lewisville, because it's up a little bit north and west, you're primarily going to use 421 if you're going to go into Winston-Salem, which is really simple just to kind of hop on and you can head right into downtown. It's really easy. But Clemmons, you have a little bit of a choice. You can get on 421 there up at the north, or down towards the south end, you can go on Highway 40. So depending in, where you're at in Clemmons, if you're going to commute into Winston-Salem, you're probably going to get on one of those two highways to go into town. And it's one of those things I've talked about before where, it's 10 minutes away, but 8 minutes of that is on the highway. So it does feel a little bit different, but you're cruising just at highway speeds, not a lot of traffic once you get on the highway. I will say in Clemmons for the area, it can get a little bit trafficy on Lewisville Clemmons Road or on the off and on ramps on 40 or 421. And that's, traffic for this area. It's not LA or Chicago traffic, but it is traffic for our area. And if we look at the map with the current homes for sale again in Lewisville, for instance, you'll see that it is getting developed a little bit further west because that's where the available land was. So look at like the Brook Hill neighborhood out west out there. So that will increase your commute just a little bit by about, 4 or 5 more minutes into Winston-Salem. Similar story down with Clemmons. If we put that map back up, you'll see down south into Davidson County where you have like Rockland or Salem Glen, some of that new construction is further down south in Clemmons. So again, that will add, 4, 5, 6 minutes onto your commute if you're heading into downtown Winston-Salem as well. But again, most of those are for the most part right off the highway, simple to get on, and just makes the commute much easier for both. If you're thinking about buying or selling a house in Lewisville or Clemmons or anywhere in the Triad, I'd love to be a resource for you. You can reach out to me directly at jeff@govalentino.com. Thanks.